Okay, I'm pretty sure I'm live. I'm going to jump into this gathering space. And today I'm talking about the next element in my SEL framework. And that next element is the fourth element. If I come down here and I look at the information board, that fourth element you will see is, we enter the social category of my framework, which deals with social awareness and management. And this fourth competency has to do with empathy and perspective, looking at the question, how do our actions influence others' perspective, like the perspective of others? So with that, let's jump up to the, it's over here, the fourth group, small private group here. And I'll press X to view the Miro board. And I'm going to take a little bit of a different approach to this particular conversation. Instead of just going through the standards, the statements, the development of each strand for this competency, I thought I would do something a little different and actually take it down a notch and read what I wrote about this particular element, this particular competency in my book from 2019, Creating a Self-Directed Learning Environment, Standards-Based and Social Emotional Learning. In this book, in Chapter 2, starting on page 42, I talk about empathy and perspective. And it's, I don't go into a lot of detail. I kept the book pretty short because I just wanted to put all of these pieces together in one place. The standards-based academic approach, the social and emotional competencies and development. There's a lot in here. But I thought today I would just take a look at just a couple of pages and basically highlight some of the statements in this section of this chapter, because, and I would consider this a resource. Statements like the concept of empathetic reasoning is often lost when an individual's purpose is centered on their own success, whether it be professional or personal. And when you think about it, when the focus of a classroom is on the individual student learning what they need to learn and only what they need to learn, then it's really hard to develop empathy because their focus is all on their own academic success. And so that's, if you're expecting students to have empathy within an environment that doesn't really allow for it, that doesn't promote it, that actually promotes the antithesis of it, then you're not going to get it. and conversations about, oh, these kids just, they don't have any empathy for each other and they just make fun of each other and this and that and complain, teacher lounge. Well, the problem is that the instruction, the assessment, the grading, the how we talk about proficiency and reporting and the curricula and all of these aspects of standards-based assessment, when we look at social and emotional competencies and development, what we can see a disconnect there. And so as we dig into, this is just one statement in this one section of this chapter, there's a couple of these little statements that are floating around in here, and I kind of want to just read the section to put these statements in context. Now, granted, authors are a very skilled breed, and I wouldn't go around saying I'm a writer, even though I have authored a book. There's a reason why we have editors, and they don't always catch everything. So forgive me if there's a couple of repeated words or a couple of syntax errors, stylistic preferences. So with that, I thought I would just jump in and and read a little bit. This should be no more than 15. This shouldn't take more than 10 minutes to get through. So this will be about as long as the other videos have been. And if I see somebody jump into the gather space here and join the discussion board, then I'll definitely pause and I'll definitely get into having a conversation with whoever comes in. So with that, social awareness and relationships is the domain. The Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning, CASEL, connects social awareness with empathy and perspective and the ability to recognize diversity and respect for others. CASEL separately describes relationship skills as the ability to communicate and cooperate with others in ways that support teamwork and strong relationships. The three components of this book's approach to social awareness and relationships combines and reorganizes these CASEL competencies into three components: empathy and perspective, interpersonal skills, and conflict resolution. So now I jump into the first component, empathy and perspective, which is the board that we're talking about today. This fourth component, empathy and perspective, is in my opinion the most difficult and most critical aspect of social and emotional learning. It also has the most relevance to academic success in that so many academic standards require a student to see a topic from a point of view other than their own. The concept of empathetic reasoning is often lost when an individual's purpose is centered on their own success, and whether it be professional or personal. Developing a sense of empathy and perspective requires not only direct instruction, but experience and opportunity for self-reflection over a long period of time. The earlier a student receives guidance in empathy and perspective, the more internalized the concepts will become as the student develops from kindergarten up through high school. And as for us as teachers, we have developed some sense of empathy, but may not have had that sense actualized and communicated in a way where we feel confident to teach it. At this, I say, do not be afraid of it, and learn to recognize that your own development in empathy and perspective can be shared with your students as you improve your own self and social awareness and management of skills detailed in this chapter. So now I get into sympathy versus empathy. There's a common misconception between sympathy and empathy. When somebody slips, a person watching might laugh, or they might passively ask, "Are you okay?" However, when somebody falls and gets physically injured, that same person watching might comment out loud how much that must have hurt, or inhale sharply through their teeth as they hold whichever body part they just watched being hurt. These differences in an observer's reactions demonstrates the difference between sympathy and empathy. Empathy is the ability to internalize how somebody else feels in that moment. It is important to note that the awareness of these differences is important as it does drive a student's ability to connect with others in more meaningful ways and can guide behaviors and reactions to situations in various contexts. Now, to understand how this works, consider your own wants and needs for friendship. Consider the friend that not only comments when you get hurt, but shares the pain that you feel when you do get hurt. That connection is important for all students to understand and exercise, even if it requires a teacher's guidance in recognizing and developing that awareness. So now I get into the topic of empathetic capacity. The most challenging aspect of this difference between sympathy versus empathy is the idea that while empathy may be rechargeable, it is not a boundless resource. It runs out. The capacity for empathy may not be the same in all people, and developing that capacity is dependent on variables beyond a classroom teacher's control. That doesn't mean empathy shouldn't be taught. It means awareness of empathetic capacity should be considered when dealing with a student who may be reacting poorly to another student's misfortune. For example, when a person falls, one person might laugh while another might run over and check to see if they're hurt. The person that chooses to react through quiet laughter themselves may not be completely wrong in their reaction, as they simply might not hold much value for the person that fell. As awful as that might sound, I have come to recognize that humans often learn to reserve more of their empathy for certain individuals that they personally value. Providing guidance for students to understand the difference between sympathy and empathy becomes quite powerful when you consider the effects those students may have as they become adults. This, hopefully, will cause questions to arise in schools and communities about how we want children to see this difference between sympathy and empathy. How deeply do we want students to access this emotional energy for the care of others? How far do we want our students to spend their emotional energy for the benefit of themselves and those around them? If we as teachers were to place concentric rings around each student, showing how far that student should be guided in spending their emotional energy, how far out from their immediate family and friends would you consider appropriate for your students to exercise empathy? Would you consider a single tight circle around each student as your students are solely focused on themselves? Or would you consider 2 or 3 concentric circles around each student, which include those in their immediate surroundings? And perhaps enough concentric circles reach outward toward their community. Would they even be circular waves that include some but not others? This then becomes a critical component in the culture of a classroom, which feeds a school and its surrounding community. The next section here, there's only 2 more sections, so I should be done in about 15. Yeah. The power of perspective. Perspective is a different but similar idea to empathy. Perspective is the view from that of the individual student. Their eyes view a world framed in a first-person perspective. When they raise their hands in front of them, they do not see a person raising their hand. They only see their own hand being raised. When they throw a ball, they don't feel the ball being caught by the other person. They only see the ball being caught and thrown back to them. When we ask students to consider the point of view of another person or the author of a book, we're asking students to imagine viewing information from the first-person perspective of another human. Perspective is a cognitive task that develops in the earliest of elementary grade levels. An example of this development has been shown in studies involving students viewing a model of a mountain. These students are then shown the same model of a mountain from a different perspective, and they may or may not recognize that mountain, depending, of course, on the perspective they were originally shown. This is similar to the idea of constellations that have been proven to only exist due to our own location in our own universe, and that if we were to travel to a different location in the universe, those same constellations, they wouldn't exist. At least not from our new perspective. It is this challenge of developing perspective in our students that we as teachers must first understand in ourselves and with each other well enough to describe this power of perspective in ways that a young human might begin to conceptually understand and develop in themselves. Okay, last section. Empathy in the classroom. Empathy becomes crucial when approaching classroom management. When a student misbehaves, consider whether that student has developed a sense of empathy that would allow them to understand their effect on other students. Oftentimes, we as teachers want to reprimand or punish students for interrupting our instruction or disturbing a positive learning environment with what is deemed as bad behavior. It is important to remember that when a student disrupts the learning of others, it's not about that disruptive student being bad. It's about the other students who are no longer learning. It is important to teach all students to recognize the value of what is being taken away from them when a student disrupts the class. In those moments of disruption, it is important to remind the class how their success is dependent on the behavior of others, that the responsibility of learning is shared between all of us, and that it's okay to politely remind disruptive students that it's not the time or place for whatever behavior because they themselves want to improve. Now, this awareness takes a long time to instill in students who might have never experienced that kind of ownership over their learning. This idea of empathy in the classroom serves to develop in disruptive students an awareness that what they want in that moment is stopping others from what they need. With this practice, the idea of a teacher punishing a student for their behavior becomes a game that nobody wins if the students don't recognize the effect they're having on others. For those students who are rarely, if at all, disruptive in a classroom, it's equally important to instill in them the strength and resilience to speak out respectfully against disruptive students. Cue those students, coach them, and celebrate those moments when students are able to redirect each other for the benefit of all student learning in the classroom. That's what I wrote about empathy and perspective as a social and emotional competency in education. This book is available. There's a link here, right here at the top. There's a link to the to get it direct from the publisher. There are other places, of course, but I like to promote the publishing company who gave me a chance and published the book. So I did also add the strands and statements, just a few of them. Again, there are 10 for each competency in each strand. So there's just a couple to kind of peruse. And if you have questions, at the bottom here, there's a Calendly link, so you can schedule a consultation with me to go in and dig deeper into how this all works and how it connects with other competencies. So, all right, if you liked this, definitely be sure to check in. I'm going to be doing the next session on the next competency next Monday, not on Fridays. Fridays we have off. So hopefully I will see everyone, well, I'll see you who's watching next Monday. And if you are watching weeks from now, reach out anytime through my YouTube channel, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, YouTube. What else? exploringthecore.com, or email me at greg@exploringthecore.com. All right. Thanks, everybody, and have a great day.